Welcome to the Insight podcast. Joining me on the show today is Kate Wadsworth. Kate is a former teacher and school leader turned founder of What If Education, an organisation exploring innovative ways to make learning happier, less stressful, and more relevant for everyone. I talked to Kate about the one thing she'd change if she was the education secretary. What's at the root of the issues we're seeing in schools today? Why it's so important for schools and staff to agree on their purpose and vision? How AI could help teachers create space in their timetables and reduce workload? And much more. Okay, but before we start, a quick favour to ask of you. If you haven't already, please hit the follow button wherever you're tuning into this episode. And if you've been listening to the show for a while, I'd really appreciate it if you rated the show too. This can help more listeners discover the podcast and the insights from all of my amazing guests. Right, now for my conversation with Kate Wadsworth. Enjoy. Kate, if you were education secretary for 24 hours and you had the power to implement a change straight away, what would that change be?
Yeah, so that change would be quite a biggie, but one that has the potential to really, one change with this thing has the potential to change everything else. And that is that I would change the way that we measure progress in our schools. So the method of measuring progress at the moment is that we use standardized tests, and that's all we've ever really known. And whilst it seems quite innocent on the surface, using a test where all the children get the same paper, same environment, same conditions, and it logistically that makes sense, and it's sort of how we've always done it. What happens is, because we do it like that, what we generate from those kind of tests is quite a lot of misleading data. And then that data is then used to judge schools, to drive education policy, to inform Ofsted inspections. And so for me, the way that we're measuring progress is we're sort of using a broken compass because of what the data tells us and how misleading the data is. So I would change how we measure progress.
It doesn't quite make sense, does it, to be testing people in a city compared to the countryside, compared to children that have got particular needs or whatever. Like, we know children learn at different paces and all these things, but yet we are saying, right, if you're in this year group, you're going to have this test and we're going to base everything around that. Doesn't quite make sense.
No, and I think what really stands out for me here, or something that really highlights this, is the fact that as a teacher, it would be seen as terrible practice if you didn't differentiate your lessons for the needs of the children. So teachers work really, really hard on making sure that every child in their class has differentiated activities, things that meet their developmental needs, things that meet their academic needs, however they're different. And a lot of work goes into that. And quite rightly, that's exactly how the education should be provided for those children. But then on the other side of that, then they're all given the same test paper under the same conditions. And it's the opposite approach. And yet it would be seen as bad practice for a teacher to give the same work to everybody. Yet we test everybody on the same paper, and we use that data as gospel to drive what happens in education. So that to me really makes it stand out as to why as a system it doesn't work.
So what would be the alternative? People listening go, okay, yeah, I get that, but it doesn't seem like there's another alternative that would be practical and economical and all these things. So how could we get a sense of where schools are at and where children are at?
And that is the big question. I think that's why we've ended up being where we are, where we kind of carrying on with a system that doesn't quite fit. And the more and more society changes and the world around us changes, the more it's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. But there are people out there doing brilliant work on this. There's a a project called Rethinking Assessment. And it's made up of lots of really great educational thought leaders and people who've come up with a brilliant alternative system. And that's starting to gain a bit of traction at the moment, which is really hopeful. And then there are also organisations like More Than a Score who are highlighting the issues that come from standardised tests. And for me, this is particularly in primary schools. That's my area of, that's my specialism, is primary. And 4 out of the 7 years we test children in a standardised way, and that's including reception in year 1. So the first 2 years of a child's education, they're tested in this way. And the younger the child, the more misleading the results.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely. So More Than a Score are absolutely brilliant at sort of highlighting where the challenges are and alternative ways of doing it, and lots of evidence and research-based advice for people.
Yeah, nice one. Straight into it. Some signposting to people and companies that are doing this in a different way. Love it.
Yeah.
And that's what you're all about as well, Kate, isn't it? With what if education, thinking, well, what if schools look different for both children and teachers? So I'm looking forward to getting into that, like your alternative vision for the future and how schools could be different. What if it looked like this? But maybe we should start on a more gloomy note of, well, what is the situation in schools at the moment? How are teachers doing? How are children doing? Listeners will know that I've been a primary school teacher for a long time. I've gone into supply work now, which has been kind of interesting because it means that I've got to see a couple of different schools and how they're doing things, and you know, the difference in behaviour, in standards, in just planning, all these different things. It's been very interesting to see. But over to you in terms of what's your general sense of how things are looking in schools?
Yeah, so if you don't mind, before we go on to this, just if we could just step back just a little bit, because it all ties in actually with my answer to this question, and that is that you were asking about alternatives to standardised testing. And so one of the things that I did when I was in year 6, so I'm early years trained as well as with the whole of primary. So I've taught in every single year group in the primary sector, but I've spent most of my time in early years in year 6 at both ends. And when I was in year 6, I was in teaching when it was the pandemic. And that gave us a situation that was different in the sense that we didn't have SATs to prepare for 2 of the years because of the fact that we were in and out of school. But we did have quite a lot of time in school in those years without SATs, without standardised tests to prepare for in year 6. And so that gave me the freedom to try new things and actually have a go at what it would feel like in a classroom without the pressure of preparing for standardised tests. And for those listeners that aren't teachers, the year 6, when the children are 10 and 11, that's when they do their end of primary school SATs exams. And really the entirety of year 6 is focused on getting them ready for that, because these tests are very high stakes. They affect how you show up in league tables. They affect what your Ofsted inspections look like. They affect everything, really. So it was this unusual situation that we had in year 6 where we didn't have that to prepare for, which was completely unknown. And so I used my early years background to change the timetable in year 6. And Monday to Friday, we still did sort of what would be classed as a formal year 6. Sorry, Monday to Thursday, a formal year 6. And then on Friday, I used the day as a self-directed learning day. And I raided the reception classroom, got all the toys and got everything that you wouldn't expect to see in a year 6 classroom, and set that classroom up with all of those things, including things like small world characters. And with those, we put the iPads out. And what happened was those year 6 children accessed those resources in an age appropriate way for year 6. So we started to get stop motion videos that were happening with the small world characters. We had magicians, people. I put playing cards out, and all of a sudden there's children teaching each other how to do tricks. And we'd got engineers, and we I can't remember what they're called now, but those scientific models where when you start one thing off, it has an ongoing effect, like a domino effect, and it knocks the next thing, the next thing, and the next thing. And you can set it up with like swinging balls that then knock a tube that then roll over, and it's got a name, and I can't remember.
It has got a name, and I can't remember either, because I think we did it in year 5 in like a science week one year, and I can't remember either, but anyway.
Yeah, but it's great for inquiry and exploration and, learning through failure and all other things. And we had a huge one of those that went on for weeks and weeks, and the children kept coming back and setting it up. And what happened was, as a teacher, I loved those days so much. They brought me so much joy. The children loved those days, those Fridays so much. I had parents telling me that their children who had been struggling to come to school were starting to love it because they lived for the Fridays. And I started to build great relationships with parents. I started to know my children better because I was engaging in this self-directed play with them. And so I was starting to chat to them outside of sort of formal learning. So I was then able to approach the way their formal learning was in a better way, because I knew what made them tick as a person, as well as what they needed to get through in their work, as it were. And so the point to all of this is that really, I think when we have these standardized tests, what happens is it narrows the curriculum right down, and it makes us focus on the things that matter, but it makes us feel like those things matter more than anything else. And what I discovered in those years when we didn't have them to prepare for was that the relationships and the connections that we built through that, on top of all the other wonderful skills that the children were getting to practice on those days that we didn't on the other days, were foundational then to the next year when we did it again with SATs, were foundational to actually getting great results. It didn't make any difference. In fact, the results were better because we carried on with this self-directed play on a Friday, which would seem crazy to do in a year 6. So what I've realized that happens is that these standardized tests do narrow the experiences of both the children and the educators. And that then leads into this question that you gave me then around what's the current situation like? And I think the current situation is a very narrow curriculum and not enough opportunities for children and educators to connect in different ways, and not enough opportunities for children to learn in age-appropriate ways that are outside of a paper, pencil, desk situation in the main.
And how is that affecting teachers? How is that affecting children? Like, who's listening? People might listen and say, well, yeah, so what if the curriculum's narrow and they're learning their maths and the English? That's all that matters. I just want my child to get into Oxford or Cambridge, so who cares? That's a great question, because you can understand why that narrative exists, because that's the narrative we're all told, that those are the things that are important. But there's a retention crisis that's happening at the moment. Around 40,000 educators are leaving every year for reasons other than retirement or death. So they're choosing to leave the profession. And then also, I've recently seen some data that said that half of the teaching profession are planning to leave in the next 5 years. And you might say, well, that doesn't really matter because they might not leave anyway, and it's 5 years away. But what that tells me is that we've got half of our education workforce working on an exit plan rather than thriving in our schools right now. Half the workforce, that's, and if you look at teacher wellbeing surveys, the results are not great reading in any way. We're talking about 80-90% of people saying they're stressed, saying that their work's affecting their mental health in a negative way. And then from the children's perspective, some new data's just come out to say that a quarter now of children are classed as persistently absent. So if we're thinking about what's the current situation like in schools, I would say that the data is telling us that schools aren't necessarily a place where our educators and children want to be. Is that, yeah,
that's what needs to change.
Yeah, if you could sum it up in one sentence, it would be that, wouldn't it? Like, it's a place that has become a chore to go to. And it's like, oh man, this should be the most fun profession, and it should be the most fun time of children's lives as well. Being a kid and getting to just explore and be creative and do all these different things. But it's just not happening. And I feel like you get little glimpses of it because, of course, we have, these topic lessons and we do a bit of art and we do PE and the children's faces light up when you're doing these different lessons and it's great. And of course, you can make maths and English more fun. I get all that. But at the same time, we're so boxed in and we've still got to teach to this certain curriculum. And we know how much of educators stress and, feeling like they are, planning to leave or whatever it is because, they don't have autonomy, do they? They can't be creative. They can't decide what their day is going to look like. It's like, this is what you need to do. And, we've made this last minute change and now you've got to start doing this. And, I forgot to, I was talking to a teacher just the other day about how they got told on the morning of World Mental Health Day. Oh, by the way, it's World Mental Health Day, so you need to go quickly to your classrooms and prepare a load of resources for World Mental Health Day. And of course, all the teachers are all stressed and worked up about getting resources prepared to teach the children about not being overwhelmed and stressed. Oh my gosh. So, yeah, I don't know. How did we get here? How did we end up in this situation where teachers and children are maybe not as enjoying school as much as they could be with this narrow curriculum just focused on these few things and all that?
Yeah, well, in 2014, the primary curriculum was changed quite significantly, and that led to this really extreme narrowing that we're seeing right now. So that's part of it. I think also, I don't know if you've ever heard of the urban myth of the boiling frog. And I think so. This concept of that if you put a frog in boiling water, it will just jump straight out. But if you put it in cold water and slowly crank up the heat, it continues to just sit there until it perishes, which is not a great analogy. But I think that's where we're finding ourselves. The heat just is continually being cranked up. The water is getting hotter and hotter and hotter because of lots of different, outside of our control, often, not always, but often, societal differences and challenges. There's all so many things that are different now, but the system and what we're expected to do and what we're expected to achieve in our schools has stayed the same. In fact, the expectations have got higher. And we're in this situation where we're consistently asked year on year to do more with less, and it just it never lets up.
I think school trips are a good example of this. I remember when I trained to be a teacher, and my NQT year, the trip was sorted. Like every year it had been planned out. Everyone knew kind of what was the progression of trips across the school. How is it linking to topics? Of course, topics changed, and so things had to be moved around, but you knew what trip you were going on when, and it was all taken care of by the admin staff, who are, of course, amazing humans that have saved me so many times. But it was all taken care of. The risk assessment, the booking of the coaches, the pricing, the sending out letters to the parents, all that stuff was taken care of. But that's one thing that now all of a sudden has been a teacher responsibility. You've got to write a risk assessment. Like, what? I don't know how to write a risk assessment. And all of a sudden I've got to do this now. And I've got to, get in touch with the coach company and all that. And it's like, how has that become an expectation now? And that's just one example of hundreds of examples of, okay, this is your responsibility now. It's all on you. And it's like teachers have now become not just professionals who teach their subject or subjects in primary school, but you're also all these other things as well, aren't you?
Absolutely. And then add to that counsellor,
exactly.
therapist.
First aider.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is. It's the weight of responsibility is enormous. I think you've just touched upon that there. And I think that's often overlooked as well, the emotional load, as well as the actual physical workload, as well as, everything else that comes into it. The load is heavy, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's true. I do think about whether also things have gotten more tricky because of shifts that we've seen in society and shifts that we've seen with family life and home life, how community has broken down and maybe role models are lacking and children aren't going to sports clubs as much perhaps, or they haven't got these, it doesn't have to be a sports club, of course, it could be any other kind of beavers, brownies, whatever it is, but just opportunity, like third spaces it's called, I guess, when you're an adult, isn't it? Not work or home, but these other places you go where you get influence from other people in positive ways and you get to talk to other people. It's like, how many children wake up every morning, go to school, finish school, go back home, get given some food, and they just sat in front of the TV for the rest of the day. Whereas maybe that wasn't the case so much 10, 20 years ago. I don't know. That's just me kind of like talking off the top of my head. But how much are teachers having to take on that burden, or is that not a factor? I don't know. I don't know how much community and social media and all these other factors come into play as well with what teachers are having to pick up.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think there's also an element of those that are going to things like sports clubs and children's activities. They've become so highly structured as well, that there's now so little time for children to be children and to do self-directed things and to play in a way that they get to explore. And I mean, interestingly, one of the most important things that is needed for children now, or what they say for their futures, for this generation, is adaptability. And yet we create such structured environments for them. So there's very little opportunity for them to adapt and react, and because it's all done for them or not at all. And I think that plays a big part in what we're seeing in our schools, because schools are very prescriptive as well. And I advocate hugely for factoring in more opportunities for children to be self-directed and to not be afraid of that as educators, and think, oh, well, that means they're not learning. They are absolutely learning. In fact, they're learning in a really, really powerful way. And by allowing them some self-directed time, that also creates different atmospheres, different environments, a different ethos in which the educators can enjoy their jobs differently as well.
Yeah, definitely. And you can understand why teachers, other educators would find it overwhelming though, like, oh, this whole different method of approaching and opening out. You know, I remember when I was told, oh, we're now doing personal projects in our school, which is where children get to choose their topic of writing and they can research. And it's like, okay, but no, like even my brain was like, no, I want structure. I need these things to tick off. But of course, that was one of the favorite things that the children did. They loved being able to choose their own topic and go away and research it. And some of the children that often didn't write very much actually wrote loads and, did so much off their own back, which is, of course, what we want to create, that adaptability, like you said, and also resilience as well, because we're not giving children very much opportunity to kind of fail and you didn't get this right and we need to keep doing it and we're going to try and build this thing and then it breaks, but we're going to try it again. It's just answer the question, circle this, complete the sentence, that's done. And it's like, no, this is not creating that resilience and adaptability that, it's been in a couple of your posts recently, hasn't it, about that? And of course it makes sense, because how many of the jobs that exist now, and we're teaching children for all these jobs that exist now, and something like 50% of them won't exist in 20 years' time by the time they're an adult. So we need them to be able to be flexible and have all these different skills like communication and IT and all that good stuff as well. Yeah,
absolutely. I think it's interesting to hear you say that as well, because I have a background in early years. I think I'm really privileged to have that because of the way that the early years work, and it's so different to the rest of school. It gives you that grounding in being able to just let go a little bit and let the children have some freedom over what their education looks like. And until you've really had the experience of doing that, or you feel that you're in a safe enough environment for the children to explore and fail and things not to be shiny and perfect at the end of it and to fit a box, it's really, really hard to do it. And that can be another thing to become overwhelmed about. It's almost easier to keep everything in a tidy little box. But for me, what that means is that we need to be focusing our staff training and our CPD days, continuing professional development days, and everything that we've got, we need to be throwing at helping our educators to understand how to do this in a different way, because it will serve not only the children, but it will serve them as well, and their well-being and their health. And we need to not just expect people will be able to do it or know how to do it, because it's so alien to the way that we're used to working outside of early years, but to provide our teachers and our school leaders and our middle leaders the chance to explore and learn about how we can actually do this. And not for everything, but just a little bit of self-directed, or a little bit more freedom and agency and autonomy for children and educators in our schools.
So would that be the response that you would give someone who might be saying, oh, well, it was easy for you, Kate, to say, you could spend your Fridays with that more open, approach, that structure, but there's no way that would happen in my school. That just there's no way I can even suggest that change. I know what my head teacher would say. It's impossible. I don't know, how would you respond to that?
I would respond to that by helping that person to explore how we let their head teachers or their leadership team see the benefit to them of them doing it this way. And what I was able to tell my leadership team was improved relationships with parents, better communication with parents, because they were getting involved in what their children were doing in school so much more, because their children were going home and talking about it. We had children who'd been absent a lot who were starting to attend school more regularly. So I started to look at it through the lens of how can approaching it in this way solve problems for my leadership team, because that's what's important to them. That's the thing that's going to get them to see the value in this. I know the value of this because I'm seeing it in my classroom and in my relationships. This class, the first class I did it with, were a particularly hard class to reach, and I had a lot of disengaged children in there. I knew I had to get to know a few of those children in a different way so that they would trust me. And I could trust them. And once we'd developed that trust, then I could start to ask of them a little bit more in their literacy, or a little bit more concentration in this subject. But I had to lay that foundation so I could go to my leadership team and say, this is how I'm going to do that. Trust me, and if it doesn't work, we stop. And I know that's idealistic and it's not always that easy, but I would say if you want to do something or you can see the value in something, how do we communicate it in a way to show that it will also solve some of their problems as well as yours?
Great. And what about other then solutions or approaches that you're seeing in schools that you are sharing? We mentioned your project, What If Education, at the start, and that's all about these, practical but realistic solutions of how schools could look different for teachers and pupils alike. What else can you tell us about kind of the work that you do and things that could be implemented in schools?
Yeah, so I discovered about 3 years ago that I was looking in the wrong direction for the change that I needed to see. I was looking out there to the system. The system needs to change if things are going to get better. And I realized that it just wasn't changing, and I just continued to get disappointed by the fact that nothing changed, nothing got better. And I'd be hopeful for a while about this or hopeful for a while about that. And in fact, interestingly, the Ofsted report card stuff's come out this week, and it's just a repeat of that. A lot of people are saying the new Ofsted system's going to be worse than the one that we were all hating and hopeful it was going to replace. And that just cements this for me, that we cannot wait for the system to change. We have to become change makers ourselves. And once I'd got my head around that, it was about, okay, I can't look out there to them for change to happen. I have to look in here and see how I can make the change happen for myself. Everything changed. And I think that's where a lot of the solutions lie. I think it's really hard when you're working in the job and you're maxed out. I'd run out of creative thoughts by the time I'd come to the end of teaching in the classroom, which might not be forever, but I'm enjoying doing this for now, and I'm learning lots of solutions, which is what I wanted to do. I needed to find some solutions rather than just carry on with the problems. But so much of it is about what's in our control. We cannot change things outside of our control, but what are we actually doing to explore what's in our control? And I've discovered in the last 3 years that there's an awful lot more than we realise there is. We just need to give the space and time to discovering what that is. And it's different in different contexts for different schools. But there's a lot more in our control than we think there is.
So what kind of examples? What What could someone listening think about trying?
So going back again to teacher training and how you're spending your training days, for me, is pivotal for this. And there's just this wonderful story of how knowing your purpose, truly knowing your purpose and co-designing that purpose as a school is the starting point. So discovering what's in your control comes from knowing what you've agreed as a school that your purpose is, because once you know that, it gives you an intentional yes and an intentional no to things. So you can say, this is within my control to say yes to this or no to this, because we know our purpose. And an example of this is a story that comes from a head teacher who arrived in, not mine, it was a story from a different teacher, their head teacher arrived on the first training day with 2 pairs of shoes, a tiny little pair of shoes for a reception child, and a brand new box fresh, and the exact same pair of shoes, but in a big year 6 kid's size, and they were all beaten up and, like they'd been well used. And the staff were all there, ready to sort of talk about what was going to happen that training day. And the head came in with these 2 pairs of shoes, and she put out a long trestle table at the head of the staff room. And she put the little pair of shoes on one end and the big pair of shoes on the other. And she just looked at everybody and said, these shoes represent every child in our school, and it is our gift to fill this gap. And the teacher who was telling me about this was saying that it was like hairs on the back of the neck standing up, and that
I got goosebumps.
It made them look at it differently. And then she went on to say, this is a childhood. This is a childhood right here, and this child is our responsibility. What their childhood looks like, we have an impact in that. So what do we want their childhood to look like? And the rest of that training day was spent on nothing else but talking about what they wanted that childhood to look like. And eventually, what came out of it was a statement that they'd all agreed that their purpose, as a result of this work and this conversation, this collaboration, their purpose was, we do education in a way that is healthy in mind, body, and spirit for everyone in our school. And then what happened was they put those shoes on display in the staff room, and every time there was a bad day or a tough day, you come in and you go, is this choice that I'm making healthy for me? I'm part of this school. And it encompassed everybody. And it allowed them to say no to things, because no, that's not healthy in mind, body, and spirit for either our children or for us. And we know our purpose so strongly, and we've agreed this is a school. So we say no to that. Some things you can't say no to, but some things you can. And then there'd be other things that would go like a school trip or a visit or a fundraiser. This is going to be amazing for our kids for this childhood. So we say yes to that. And it gave them this clarity, this filter through which to make decisions and choices that perhaps before they'd gone through that process, they would have thought were outside of their control.
Yeah.
I just love that story so much.
Oh man, it's just gold, isn't it? Because it might be Viktor Frankl that says something like, if you have a why, you can bear almost any how, maybe. And it's that kind of thing, isn't it? Like, teachers we're not lazy. We're not trying to cut corners. We're not, trying to leave at 3:30 and enjoy all our holidays. Most teachers become a teacher because they love teaching kids and being around kids and teaching them new things and exposing them to these experiences. So we're perfectly happy for it to be really hard, but we need to know why it's going to be hard. And if it's hard because you've just decided this is a new thing you're introducing, or I don't know, whatever other example it is, then that we get stressed and we leave the profession because we're fed up. It's not like we don't want to work hard. We just need to know our purpose. And it kind of links to other stories that I'm partial to the odd bro podcast. I do like a bit of that.
Me too.
Good. And I'd like to think I'm not a bro podcaster, but maybe there's a little part of me that is. But they talk about the businessmen, the Musks and the Bezoses, and how they filtered every decision through that one, I don't know, question, like, is this making it easier for the customer in respects of Amazon? Or if it's SpaceX, it's like, does this get us closer to Mars? Or I don't know, like some kind of question that just, if everything filters through that, then it's either a yes or a no. And it's as simple as that. Now, I'm not endorsing Elon Musk or the tactics of Amazon at all, but it's just like a useful little comparison, isn't it? Yeah. If in any organization you're saying, well, what is our purpose? Why are we here? Right. Does this either move us closer to our goal of making sure that children are happy and fulfilled, or does it not? And if it doesn't, scrap it, forget it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I particularly love about this is it encompassed everybody, because there was a recognition that the children aren't going to be healthy and happy in mind, body and spirit if the staff aren't. And so I loved that idea that whilst they were talking about the childhood and they looked at it through the lens of the child, it actually included everybody, which is crucial if we're going to have happy, thriving schools. There was a quote by Rebecca Leake. She's just a brilliant educator. And she mentioned that if we are trying to use our training days or our CPD on things that are not about staff well-being and about the teachers being healthy and happy, then we are sticking plasters on wet feet in trying to put any initiatives in place, or and we are, aren't we? Like, until the foundational things are right, until we are all aligned on what we're doing this for and why we're doing it, we are going to continue just going around in busy circles, trying to make sense of this whole big ugh that's happening to us. But some clarity that comes from spending time on not only valuing the well-being of your workforce, but understanding what it means for you as a team to do this job well and to agree on that. And so many times you'll see on a website a vision or a purpose statement, and I am so guilty of this. I've had to look on a website what our vision is, ready for if an inspector came and asked me. That's, for me, then is not a vision or a purpose or a mission. And so what I loved as well was the simplicity of this. And you described it there with those other ones. I think simplicity is hard.
It is. It should be simple, but it's not.
No. And it takes time and effort and energy. But oh my goodness, how worth that time, how worth that effort, and how worth that energy to pull your team together and to be working to a shared purpose.
Oh, definitely. And like the fact that everyone was in on it and agreeing on it. Like, it's one thing to have a vision that's given to you. Like, this is our vision. You need to work towards it. It's very different to be saying, like, what do you think our vision should be? Let's all, contribute and agree on it together. Of course, we know this from organizational psychology and everything else as well. And simplify. Yeah. I mean, it makes me laugh, with children's rewards in schools, how I can sometimes go into a school. It's like, so, what, if you do something right, I'm a new teacher, I don't know you, but what does your teacher normally do? And they're like, we get house points and we move up the zone board and we also get this golden time and we also give this certificate. And it's like, whoa, like there's just all these different things. It's like, simple is best. Like, what's the one thing that we can do here that moves the needle? And that's a very simple example, but actually it applies to so many things, doesn't it? Like, it's about what we cut out, not what we add in, that makes a difference, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And how we create choice. I think as soon as we start to create a sense of choice for everybody and a sense of, we do have some agency here and there is freedom to do things the way we want to do it. I think, and I also think having a really strong purpose like that takes away some of the Ofsted fear and some of the fear of outsiders coming in, because you have a narrative that's true, that know is the truth, and that
you're completely confident in. Yeah.
We do this like this because we have agreed that this is what's important to us, and we know why. Yeah. Immediately that feeling of, am I going to get caught out? Well, you can't catch me out on that, because we're making these decisions based on intentional ideas, thoughts, concepts. So it's spending time on those things, ditch the rest, like, just for now, park your initiatives, park everything else until the purpose, the values, the team, the staff, everybody is in a place where, we know who we are. Then that's foundational, and we can start to move forward with the other things. You can't build Rome in a day.
Love it. All just gold. Well, I want to move on to a slightly different topic to ask you about. But is there anything else that you want to talk about in terms of what if education or anything else before I come on to another question? And no worries if not.
You know me, I could talk about this. So I won't say anything else. I'll let you ask me the next question because, otherwise I would continue chewing your ear off.
I wanted to ask you about AI because it's something that, we're all talking about more now. And I've had 2, 3, 4 guests on that kind of some quite different opinions about AI as well. Some people saying that this is great and this is going to save so much time and this is fantastic. But then also, my friend Russell Baker from over down in Australia, he was kind of saying, well, you need to be a bit cautious and what are we going to lose from our kind of creativity and our decision making if we give over too much to AI? Are we going to lose some authenticity? So I thought that was really interesting as well. But I know that this is something that you discuss and share posts about. So AI in education, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think what you've described there, both of those things are really equally valid. And I think that I sort of always look at this like a pendulum swinging, if you like. So with every new thing that comes in, there's balance, isn't there? It just balances itself out automatically with both good and bad. And it's not going to be any different with this. But the pendulum's perhaps swinging a little bit wider. We're going to see amazing improvements and AI is going to be able to do incredible things for us in a positive sense. But I think that there's also the other side of that coin. And I can't say that the other side of the coin isn't a little bit scary at times, a lot scary. It's that it's a known unknown. But what I do know is that in terms of education and for educators, we have now got something that I think we can use to our advantage. And at least in the short term, I don't know what it'll look like, and the pace at which it moves is crazy.
Yeah.
But in the short term and right now, there are many things that as educators, I think we would be saying, I wish that I could create more time in my timetable, but I don't know how, or I wish I could do this. I wish I could automate some more of my processes. Well, now we actually have something that can help us to do this. And also, to your point earlier around how teachers are expected to be experts in everything, and we are the frontline service for children and families every day of the week, 5 days a week. So, for example, large language models like ChatGPT can help us to not have to be experts on our own. So we can seek advice, we can get ideas, we can get activities, resources, we can diversify the learning experiences we give, we can send better emails that help us to communicate better. All of those things that we were having to just do on our own and just become overnight experts in. We now almost have a professional in our pocket that we can say, I've had this tricky email, I need to be able to reply to it in a measured, professional way, but I also don't want to relinquish what I need to happen here. And I want to make sure, before you were sat in front of a computer screen for an hour, rereading that email, rewriting it, redoing. Now we have something we can bounce those ideas off and come back with something that you can have that sort of security and that confidence to go, yeah, that's a great worded email. I can now send that with confidence. And so there's lots of ways in which AI can help us to just take some of that pressure, some of that, I'm doing all this on my own. And in terms of the creating space in your timetable, if we go back to that, having a Friday where you do year 6 differently or any year group differently, I could see AI tools helping us to do that. Because if you have a scheme of work that's across 6 weeks, and it may be that you're in a multi-academy trust and you have to teach what everyone's teaching and you don't have much autonomy over that, or you have a scheme that you have to use, you can pop that scheme into ChatGPT or another large language model and ask it to help you condense it into 4 lessons instead of 6. No lost learning, all the objectives the same, the children coming out with exactly the same as they would have done. But then you've saved yourself 2 hours because those extra 2 lessons have been condensed into the 4. And I did that to create that Friday for me, but I did it manually and it took a lot. It was worth it. Yeah. It was absolutely worth it. But the amount of time that took, I could do that now in a fraction of the time and get better quality results. And not only that, but I would probably In fact, what I have done is I've created a chat GPT that is my ideal teacher, what I consider, if I was going to go in and smash it as a teacher that day, what would that look like? And then I could put my scheme into that and get it to make it more active, get it to make it more engaging. These are the restrictions I've got. I've got a space that's this small. Like, I want to be able to get the children to work as I want it to be a quiz, or I want it to be all of those things that I would have had to come up with on my own. I've now got a co-creator that can help me to do that really well. So not only can I condense it into 4 lessons, but I can make it exactly how I want it to be. And how can I assess also, if I'm going to measure progress differently, how can I use this to assess in a different way? How can I make this a non-standardized assessment that's just as effective, just as practical, that's going to give me the data that I need? And it's asking those sort of really big questions that have felt impossible before now. There's actually an opportunity to do that and share some of the load.
Is that because I've experimented a little bit with ChatGPT, but GPT, I always say it the wrong way around. Is that can you save that? Can you, like, your ideal teacher, is that saved? Like, so you just keep putting it in and saying, oh yeah, Mrs. whatever, your like alter ego, Mrs. Doubtfire or whatever it is, like, like just keep putting it into the same thing. Is that right?
Yes. So it's super simple to do. And in fact, I've got a little video coming out on my website for how to do this.
Nice.
You do not need you do not need any tech knowledge for this at all. All you do is you click onto a spot where it says create a GPT. Down the side, you type in exactly what you want. It says how do you want it to instruct you? You tell it what you want, and it guides you through the process. There's no coding needed. It's literally just type in the boxes what you want it to look like. And then from that point on, if I'm wanting to go on and create a scheme of work, I just click on that GPT and it gives me advice through that lens.
Yeah. Man, I sound like such an amateur, but I just kind of dip in and out. Like, I'll just jump on it and saying like, oh, can you help me with this? I've used it to help me write training plans. I've got high rocks in 7 weeks time. This is the equipment I've got. Can you make me a training plan? It's like, it's great for that. It forms a, nice little basis. But then on that note, I guess, when I was a teacher and planning English, I might have used it to something I would have taken, 20 minutes to write a good example. It takes 30 seconds. Could I say, can you write me a good example of a diary entry suitable for a 7 or 8 year old in the UK and blah, 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 blah. And I get it. Or, I think of Dan Fitzpatrick, the AI educator who came on the show a year or two ago. And he gave examples of, creating kind of a video image of Henry VIII or someone, and then kids can talk to that historical figure and ask them questions. And so that's all really cool. But then we got to be a bit cautious with accuracy, and also, does this actually apply to my children? Like, I got a great example of a diary entry, but actually it wasn't that good and there were things missing, and I wanted them to practice using inverted commas or whatever it is, so I have to edit it. So it's like all these things, we have to be a bit discerning, don't we? How accurate are they? And also, have we made it applicable to the children that we're teaching? We can't just kind of take it off the shelf and go, just use this.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And it speaks to what you were saying earlier about making sure, and I think maybe it's better to say, like, when you say take it off the shelf, I think often schemes that we're using are off the shelf, and we can use AI to do the opposite of that. So rather than using it to do the work for us, it's a co-creator. And you mentioned earlier about teachers and educators, school leaders, we are not afraid of hard work. We just want to do good work. We want to do work that makes us feel alive. We want to go in and teach a lesson that has us buzzing and interested and exciting. We know the kids are going to love it. And that's what we love to do. And that's what's starting to disappear. And it's getting replaced with things that are much more paperwork heavy and much more prescribed and not context specific. But what we have here is we have the opportunity to make things context specific. So for me, when you say that, I think, well, actually, it's the opposite. We take a scheme of work that's generic, that's been designed for every child in the country, and we use AI to make it specific to our kids, say, like what our kids' needs are. A little bit like you said about your training program. These are the weights that I've got. This is the system that I've got. Now create me a training plan. You could do that, but just with your class.
Yeah.
And it would never be about just lifting something and using it. I think what this is it's an opportunity to have a co-creator, a co-designer, somebody who you bounce something who you bounce ideas off. That was a Freudian slip, wasn't it? That you bounce ideas off, and it gives you that level of confidence and that level of creativity that you just sort of feel like, I don't have time to be that creative alone. But with a little help, I can get really creative. And then the fun starts to come back a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah. A great point. It's a co-creator. It's not the creator that we're just handing over the work to. It's like, let's work together. That seems like a healthy approach to it. And it is funny when you say he or she, like as someone said the other day about how they still use please and thank you with ChatGPT. And it's like, you don't need to be polite, but we still do, don't we? Can you please do this for me?
I know. The funny thing is when I've put in so many prompts, I start to feel a bit guilty. I'm like, I'm being a bit demanding here. Like, this is getting needy. Honestly. Yeah.
Would you mind, please, awfully, if you wouldn't mind? It's just our Britishness.
Sorry to ask again.
Yeah, sorry to bother you. Yeah. Oh, that's funny. That is funny. Well, Kate, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. This is a topic that I love talking about, the future of education, how it could look different. What if it was a place, where teachers were happy, where kids were happy, where we were actually preparing them for 2030 and beyond, and not just sticking to the old ways of doing things. So it's been really cool to chat with you.
Oh, likewise. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
I've got 3 quick-fire questions I finish off with, if you've got time.
Yeah.
The first one is, what's one lesson you wish you'd have been taught when you were a child?
Yeah, so one lesson that I wish I'd been taught when I was a child is about self-talk. And I've developed this thought recently, actually, because I listened to a podcast with Ben Bergeron. He's the CrossFit guy. And he mentioned in this podcast about who is it that's talking to you in your head? Is it the coach or is it the critic? And, sometimes you hear something and it just resonates with you. And I've always had a little bit of a about positive self-talk, because I've thought absolutely often we need to be positive in our thoughts. But sometimes we don't do the right thing, say the right thing, behave in the right way. And so positive self-talk isn't actually the answer there, especially when I was talking to kids at school about, we have to pull ourselves up sometimes on things and learn and do better. And when we know better, we do better, sort of thing. And I loved this sentence because for me, it's not about criticizing, it's about coaching. So how do you coach yourself through that and move forward? The critic holds you where you are. That's the negative self-talk. The coach helps you to move forward, and it's not always saying that everything's brilliant and right, but that you can always move forward if you coach yourself through something. And I loved that concept. And I think if I go back into the classroom or I go back into schools, that's something I would work with kids on a lot, about how do we become the coach rather than the critic in our heads.
Like it. Mm-hmm. Next one. What's one habit you've added to your life, or even a habit that you've kicked that's helping you feel happier and healthier?
Yeah, so a habit that's definitely made a difference to my life is we very much were the family that flew by the seat of our pants. So there was a lot of chaos going on in every direction. And I set the intention to set some time aside every week to prepare. So actually time for planning. So not just the planning, but making sure that time existed for planning. And in that time, that 1 hour on a Saturday morning, I plan the food, I plan the meals, I plan all the sports dates go in the diary, everything goes in. And that habit has just transformed our lives, because whilst I give an hour on a Saturday morning to that, I save so many hours from looking for socks and shin pads and netball dresses and like everything, because of that, protecting that time to plan. So that's the habit. Protect time to plan is a habit that works for me.
And the last one, if you could give everyone in the world one book, which book would you give them?
Yeah, I would say a journal. And that's because I think journaling just has such a brilliant power about it for helping us to understand our lives, understand our thoughts, and understand each other. And I think you can have a journal from just draw and scribble in it from the youngest age right through to, the oldest of ages, and it still is powerful and has so much value to your life. So yeah, a journal.
Nice. Well, great. Thank you again. Where can people get in touch with you, find out more about the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so my website, which is whatofeducation.co.uk, there's lots of stuff on there. And I'm just in the process of building a library of these really short form how-to AI videos for educators. So I'm not focusing at all on how the children would use it. My focus at the minute is how we can use it to make educators' lives better and to make education happier, healthier, less stressful for everyone. And for me, that starts with educators. So my slant on AI is how can we use AI tools to make the job of educating, school leading and teaching better? And so there's a library of those going on at the end of this month. And then also you'll find me on Instagram at what.if.education and on LinkedIn as Kate Wadsworth.
Perfect. Thank you so much again for your time. And
thank you so much for having me.
Cool. Thank you for tuning in. I really hope you found my conversation with Kate insightful. If you enjoyed the episode, please do share it with friends, family and colleagues who you think would find it interesting too. And remember, you can also support the podcast by following and rating the show on whichever app you're listening on. Thanks again, and I look forward to bringing you another episode soon.